Roblox gaming companies are all around us. Thousands of games have been bought and sold by these companies/studios, many of them taking games with high potential, pledging to their existing communities that they will help elevate and improve these games, taking them up to be one of Roblox's most best and most played games. Sometimes we see these original founders sell their games off, but work alongside the companies/studios to help deliver better and concise content. But more often than not, we see these games sold off entirely. With full creative control, there is no saying what direction these companies/studios plan on taking these games. And obviously, having their main goal being trying to make their money back from what they've just spent, there's only one real way for them to make money. Paywalls are often frowned upon, especially when the items locked behind paywalls either give you an advantage over other players, or they make the game more enjoyable compared to if you play it without spending any money. Normally what you would see locked behind these paywalls are small things that would help the player along the way, but don't change the gameplay for the player that much, or give them an advantage over others. However, that's not always the case, as with this one gaming company that enjoys putting things behind paywalls that either elevates your experience compared to normal players, or gives you an advantage over others. DoBig Studios, with over 8 billion combined visits on all their games, is well known for approaching games and trying to buy them, and pretty much changing the game entirely from what it originally was, with them having games such as Blade Ball, A Dusty Trip and Gym League under their directive control. It's fair to say that they are one of Roblox's most leading game companies/studios, but despite their success, they are very much hated amongst Roblox communities for the simple reason of taking games to the next level of pay to win/pay to have fun. Everyone knows that Blade Ball has become one of Roblox's most pay to win games, which was not what it was set out to be, but that's no thanks to DoBig, who invested $1.5 thousand into the early stages of development, and with the game only having 2 developers at the time, being Giddy and Chunch Bunch, they struggled to deal with a lot of bug fixes, so they had to call for help, with DoBig taking 75% of the shares and taking over the monetization of the game entirely. With them now having all this power over the game, they needed one real thing, and that's their money back. So with that, they made the game extremely pay to win, covering the screaming pop-ups, new events, and ways players could spend their money to have an advantage over others. As with any games company, you never just stop at one game, you set out to buy other games and apply the same concepts, hoping to make more money and more profits. So this time, they decided to set out and do the same thing with A Dusty Trip, but backfired entirely. DoBig had offered $19,000 to purchase A Dusty Trip from its original developers, but that deal had fell through when they then reduced the offer to $14,000, but the original developers wanted more. But A Dusty Trip was eventually sold on to its now owner, Jandal, for $20,000. A Dusty Trip was very successful in its early stages of development, with no real paywalls or issues of that sort. But as time went on, even though A Dusty Trip was bringing in a lot of money, a lot more was wanted. DoBig himself was actually in charge of the monetization of A Dusty Trip, but it's one thing to note that partnerships are often not spoken about, especially when it's to do with gaming studios, so whoever's seen at the top is whoever takes the blame for what's added to the game, especially if it's heavily frowned upon by the community. With DoBig in charge, we saw constant updates, but they were more tailored towards people who were willing to pay than those who wanted the free experience. And after months of consistent updates like Showroom and Season Passes and Crate Spins, more and more players were getting angry of what was being added to the game, as the free side was feeling neglected. And with the simple concept of the game being driving in a straight line, killing mutants and collecting loot, it just didn't make sense why supercars were being added to the game, which is set in the middle of the desert. So with this, the player count started to decrease drastically. Some efforts were done to change this, with small events and small changes, but with more paid updates being dropped and reused season passes being out, everything really just started to fall apart. Things got so bad that the owner Jandal had to step back from being the lead developer because of all the backlash and hate he was getting from these updates. So we left it all to DoBig to take over. Developers then started to come forward, admitting that they had no actual control over what was being put out, and everything was just being created and released under the direction of DoBig. Due to contracts being in place, they aren't exactly able to override his decisions on what was being put out. We do see more games being sold on, and original developers stepping back and letting game studios take full control over their games. And it is fair to say that not all games companies/studios are the same. Some actually care about the content that's being put out and have it in their best interest to balance the free and paid content. But it is their set goal to make money, so the actions for how they try and make money can always be excused.